Hi, I am Allison Kramer, Vice President of Marketing for our Digital Service Operations Management Business Unit at BMC.
Hi, my name is Wendy Rentschler, and I am head of our Global Corporate Social Responsibility here at BMC. And we are thrilled that you are joining us today to talk about prioritizing inclusion and driving innovation.
Great. Well, Wendy, are you ready? Should we just dive in?
Yeah, let's just do it.
Okay. So tell us first, what's the difference between diversity and inclusion, and what's the benefit of having an inclusive culture?
That's such a really great question and more timely than ever. You're probably seeing a lot of data and LinkedIn articles around the ROI of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or the ROI of corporate social responsibility. These things have always been important for the human condition, but as the market has changed, the buying center has changed, the pandemic, COVID, remote work, Generation Z really hitting the workforce, it's become a business imperative for a myriad of reasons. One, human capital is the largest investment of the majority of large organizations. It typically is 70% of any organization's cost. And so investing in your human capital is extremely important, and being able to elevate and engage that human capital is even more essential. And when you're creating an inclusive environment, that really leads to and drives innovation in your workspace, whether you're creating software products or a menu item at a restaurant chain. It's really important that you're bringing everyone to the table. And it's also really important from like a recruitment and attraction standpoint. As this is being recorded, we are in the middle of the Great Resignation, and people have the choice now of employers, and top talent really wants to make sure that organizations that they join are demonstrating corporate social responsibility, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and sustainability. And there was a really great Deloitte study that came out actually in 2017 that this figure comes from, that we're looking up on the screen. And this was a business case before we were talking about it more, normalizing it more as a business case 5 years ago. And it's even more relevant today. We see the 2 times likely to meet and exceed financial targets, the 6 times more likely to be innovative and agile. And when we talk about diversity and diversity of viewpoint, we're talking about bringing homogenized groups together with different lived experiences, different journeys in their career, different parts of the journey they're on, whether they're early in career or closer to exiting out of career. I know that you and I have talked before about the meditative philosophy of the beginner's mind. When we're bringing different people to the table, a lot of times we're able to see things that maybe we didn't see because we were an expert in something, because we had all these lenses of lived experience. And when we can come from a place of curiosity, that's where we can really start to drive innovation and create space for people to have ideas. So this has become the business imperative of our time. To be competitively, have that competitive advantage, you've got to be thinking inclusively to drive innovation, to attract talent in a very, very tight labor market. And additionally, for your buying center, there is not a week that goes by that I am not asked about our sustainability initiatives, our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And those are coming from partners, clients, prospects, and even talent. I'd love for you to share the example that you had of just interviewing someone recently. That kind of really speaks to the benefits of diversity and inclusion here.
Yeah, so just this morning, I was interviewing someone for a product management position, and she brought up organically that she was excited by her schedule for the interviews because she said it included 2 women, which was unusual, and that both of those women were in leadership positions and had titles and responsibilities equal to or greater than the men that were also on the list with her. And she felt like that was a great sign about BMC. And she liked the idea that if she were to come to the table as a female leader, she wouldn't be by herself. and that she wouldn't always be in a room where she was the only woman or the woman, right? Or, checking a box in that way. And the idea that just on our interview panel, we had more than one woman was really an interesting call out for her. Honestly, I had never heard a candidate say that before. And I don't even know for myself personally that that's something that I've ever even looked at or thought about myself and maybe should have. So I thought it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, and that's just really speaking to the market that we're in today. I work closely with our talent acquisition team. I have run talent acquisition teams before. I stay in contact with all of my talent acquisition colleagues. It is such a tight labor market, and talent wants to work at organizations that are demonstrating these inclusive cultures because they want to be a part of something special. They want to be a part of having the ability to have their voice heard and being able to hear other people's voices. So as an organization, being able to demonstrate that is essential. And it's incredible for your product line. It's incredible for your people. It reduces your turnover. It increases your revenue. And, technology can solve so many challenges and bring so many opportunities to folks. And it's a really, really exciting time here at BMC and in the labor market and just in human capital in general. So let's go to the next slide, because I think we should really talk about, how we're thinking of the connection between innovation and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So one of the things that I always like to talk about when we're talking about the connection between innovation and diversity and inclusion is like not just thinking of diversity as gender or, all the different types of demographics. There's also neurodivergence, people with disabilities. There are so many things that we can talk about when it comes to the connection between innovation and diversity, and I think, and inclusion. And when we start to add on those additional layers, it can become a really exciting time when we're having these different voices at the table, when we're talking about creating software for around accessibility or products for people that might be on the spectrum. So I think there's some really interesting things in the works and in products in general, but I'd love to hear about your experience here at BMC and in general and in life, having your voice at a table.
Right. So just recently, probably in the last 2 years, is probably the first time I really shared at work that I have Asperger's. So I'm on the spectrum. And the context in which I shared that was we had a working meeting and we were just all sharing different things about ourselves, things that we thought it was part of a team building activity. And we were trying to just share something significant or interesting about our lives. And when I brought that up, what I always think is interesting as soon as I say it is people will say, well, you're not. Right? But you're outgoing. You're this, you're that. You can talk in front of people. You don't fulfill this archetype that I have in my head of what that word means. And, at that time I explained it away and said, well, it's because I'm old and I've developed my coping mechanisms by now, or I've masked or shrouded it in different ways. And it was a really interesting experience for me to see how people reacted to me either differently or engaged me a little differently after that. For example, some accommodations maybe people will make is because of eye contact or loud noises or just some of the things that are hard for me that I think folks maybe looked at differently before. Now more, hey, you know what, we're going to go in this event or this thing and there's going to be a lot of flashy lights. Is that okay for you? Like they'll kind of just bring some of those things up, just thoughtfully and kindly. But I think the other thing that's interesting is that because my brain does work differently, I do have a different perspective, right? I have, some of the benefits of Asperger's are you are incredibly focused. You can be very creative. You can do all these different things. And I think being able to be my full self at work and not feel like I'm hiding part of it or compensating or acting like part of it isn't there has been very welcoming, helpful, and interesting for me. And it also, frankly, takes less mental energy for me, right? And now I can put all that energy I was using and hiding some things or overcompensating, et cetera, and use that energy towards my creativity, towards coming up with interesting stories, towards building unique customer events, towards doing things that actually benefit our larger ecosystem.
Really great what you are sharing in terms of being able to share or have that additional space. I don't think a lot of times people that are in dominant groups or have not experienced microaggressions or have not realized that they've experienced microaggressions really realize like the full-time job it is to mask what you're saying, think about how you might be perceived when you say something. It is exhausting, and it does take away some of that mental capacity that could be used towards helping like build a product line or a go-to-market strategy, because you are worried about how you might be perceived. And I think that's been one of the beauties of people starting to work remotely from home. I read an article around how, in particular, like women and BIPOC professionals, Black, Indigenous, people of color professionals are really enjoying and thriving and wanting to work in that remote capacity because they have more psychological safety. They feel like they can be their more authentic selves. And there is like that barrier of safety that they have there. And there have been a couple of articles I've seen too, where like work productivity has gone up across the board because people are working from home. They're being able to like be flexible with their schedules, and they're feeling more included. And because everyone's online together, right? Instead of some people in the office and then some people on a call together, it's become a more inclusive experience in general. So thank you so much for sharing that. One of the things too that I thought was really interesting when we put this deck together, Allison, is, for instance, this study that we're talking about right now around like perspectives, interpretations, predictive models, this came out in 2014. At the time of this recording, it's 2021. The image that we were talking about earlier, that came out in 2017 and 2018. This work has been going on for quite a time, and organizations that have really started to embrace it are really starting to reap the benefits of product development, human capital retention, sales and revenue. So a lot of really exciting things happening. And like, if you start to actualize this in your own portfolio or in your roles and in your organization, you'll start to see the benefits. And always remember that this is a continual learning journey. You never stop learning. You're going to make mistakes sometimes. Just being accountable, coming from a place of curiosity, and having the right intention will get you to a place of really creating innovative products, ideas, strategies, career opportunities when you're thinking of it inclusively.
Yeah. No, and I love the learning aspect, because there have been a lot of folks who've, spoken to me and said, how can I make you more comfortable? Or I know another person in a similar circumstance. Like, what are some things I can do that won't make them uncomfortable, but can draw them out more? So I think that kind of leads into our next topic around how do you inclusively drive innovation? What are some of the things that we can do, and you've helped us do at BMC?
Yeah, so there are so many things that you can do to drive innovation, and a lot of times they're really simple. I often find in my previous roles, and like when I used to have clients and would do consulting engagements, that people would think it was a very esoteric idea and it was extremely complex. And oftentimes I'm just like, did you ask people, and give them the opportunity to just lend their voice? And that's something we do here. We actually have ideathons where we will run, and it's open to all of our employees to submit an idea. The ideathon that we did most recently was around diversity, equity, and inclusion, where we opened it up to employees to think of all of our own products, our chatbots, Amy, Helix. How can we use these tools to create possible opportunities for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and lend that lens on it? It's really just taking the lens and applying it to, different opportunities, spaces, and products. And through that journey, we got a lot of really incredible ideas. There were presentations, and some of them are actually in a current proof of concept. And it was people from all over the organization. It wasn't just product people, it was people in HR, people in order services, people in procurement. There were ideas from all across the board, and there was not one department that had like more ideas than the other. It was really just giving people the opportunity to bring their ideas to the table, because a lot of times too, we don't know what our employees are into outside of work. A lot of people do coding, they're learning Python, they're learning Golang, they're upskilling, they're taking leadership courses, they're taking coaching courses, and maybe they do work in procurement, maybe they do work in order services, maybe they work in sales. So being able to just open it up to everyone, and then like through that funnel, filter ideas, get new ideas from those ideas, is a really great and powerful way to make people feel included, see them, hear them, and also create more additional products and have a really incredible story to tell. So that was one thing that we've done. Where we have a couple of other ideathons kicking off in specific departments to help us figure out ways around our sustainability journey, around our ESG journey. And we want to hear everyone's voice, because we're not the only people that have these ideas. And some of the best ideas are typically from all over the business. Another thing that we have done is we're working within our product teams to do like blended learning through inclusive product design education. So inclusive products are really important, accessibility, inclusive language. And when you start to really drive that as education awareness campaigns, a lot of employees were already doing this work already. They were already very interested in it, doing these certifications on their own, but really programatizing it and making it a part of your culture is really important, because then everyone knows where you stand on inclusion and accessibility. I think we talked about this earlier, but diversify. I know at the water cooler, people are saying there are no women and BIPOC people in tech. That is not true. We are everywhere. But the rules of the game need to be changed. When you are hiring based on pedigree and privilege and resume, you might not be finding the best talent. So like really figure out what you're looking for and hire for those skills and not for a piece of paper. And from that, you'll bring really diverse ideas to your table to create innovative solutions and products. I have countless stories that I could share with you on that, from hiring people in sales into recruitment, which is kind of a good comparison. That's a really similar job, but recruitment to business analyst. There are so many different things that people are interested in. And the way that we learn is so different than we learned 15 years, 20 years, 30 years ago. Learning is at your fingertips. I have a masterclass app, a Calm app. I go to graduate school, Coursera. I love skills building. And most people are at that place now. Learning has met them where they're at. And so never assume what someone's into, always give people options. And then the other thing that I would say is have multiple channels for people to share. Not everyone's going to pitch up at a meeting and say something, but if you give people the opportunity to do it through like Slack, Teams, WhatsApp, email, just let them know you want to hear their idea, they will come to you.
What can you recommend? So I had someone come to me the other day with an interesting problem, and his perspective was, look, he's like, I'm the majority, right? He's like, I'm the person who has to open up and be more inclusive. He's like, and I have to tell you, being all of this new inclusion is making me a little nervous, right? Like, I don't always know how to act. I don't always know if I'm saying the right thing. I feel like I can't be me anymore, right? Because I'm trying to not talk so they can talk, or these other things. What advice can we give for folks who are maybe more part of the in crowd, as it were, already, who are trying to make sure they support all these new folks coming in and making a clean and healthy and supportive environment for them? How do they continue to stay authentic and true? What are some things we can do to maybe help them feel more comfortable with all of these new things that maybe they're just, they're trying to get ready for and they want to participate, but they're just not sure how yet?
Yeah, that's a really great question that I get often. And I have a couple of things that you can do for a mindset. One was what we talked about earlier, that meditative practice of beginner's mind. Just watch a couple of YouTube videos about it. It's like 2 to 3 minutes to understand, just from like a very high level concept of these different ideas from people's different lived experiences. To understand, like, where is this fear coming from? Is the fear coming from, feeling accountable? Is the fear coming from, how did I not know? Is the fear coming from, if I give more people space, then I won't have as much space? And really explore that. And from there, solutions will present themselves. Third, think about when you were earlier on in your career and maybe advantages or disadvantages, or how you wish things would have went differently. Oftentimes, people maybe forget like where they started from, right? And then another thing I would say is, at the end of the day, no matter like who someone loves, what they look like, what sex they were born, we all have the same desires and goals. We are all human. We all want the best for our families. We all want to be successful, and we all want to be happy. And that is the human condition. So there is something that you have in common with everyone, but you don't have to talk about that either. I think oftentimes too, it's like, oh, I need to have like these race relations conversations with anyone that doesn't look like me. You don't need to do that. You just need to show up to work, treat people with respect, have the right intention, and make sure you're giving, especially if you're a leader, that you're giving everyone the same opportunity based on the work that they've demonstrated, and be accountable to yourself. If you, a lot of times, like if you really start to think that you have blind spots, if you start to get that like unconscious bias training, like you watch an unconscious bias video, like a 1 minute or 2 minute one, to like understand it, you'll start to like recognize your own patterns. This is a continual journey. This is like working out. You don't do 1,000 crunches in a day and expect to have a 6-pack for the rest of your life. You do a little bit every day. And that is the same thing with this work. Work on being a better human every day by working on yourself. Because when you work on yourself and you're happy, you're going to exude that. When you start to learn about other people's experience, and when you start to make sure that you're giving everyone the same opportunity, it works itself out. But don't get into your head around, what am I going to say when I see like a woman or like a person that doesn't look like me, or, whatever the case may be, that's not your dominant group. Just say hi. Do you need anything? Like if you're a leader, like, do you have the resources you need? Do you understand the deliverables? Do you understand the timeline? I think it's just like, keep it simple, but then also work on yourself. And if you're really looking to take the next step in that journey to like, if you want to like, not just if you're toe in, but jump in, attend an event that's like so outside of yourself. Eventbrite is a great place to just go in and type Pride, Menopause Awareness Day, just pick something that like is not anywhere in the realm of anything you ever thought you would attend, and go to that. Because if you can do that, you will be okay with the rest of the journey that you need to go on as a human.
No, that makes sense. Okay, so unleashing the power of inclusion. I think this talks a bit more about how our recruits perceive us, how we look at those things, and how we can really show up for them as a place where they will be valued. So do you want to talk us through some of this data?
Yeah. So when we talked earlier about, and you gave the wonderful example of the product manager you just spoke to, this is what the workforce is looking for. I hear story over story where people will resend their acceptance of an offer, ghosting, where everyone's having that experience right now. Some people like not coming back to work at some of my my recruiter colleagues at other organizations. We're in a time where people have gone, like 2020 and I guess 2021 have been years where people we have gone through a pandemic. We've gone through another recession. We've lost a lot of people, remote work, all of the things that we've had to deal with. And people are really starting to like take a look at themselves in their life. It's been like a global catharsis is what has happened. And so, first you need to respect that. And you're probably going through that as well. If you've signed up for this, I think everyone has gone through it. First off, that's another thing too. We're all going through this together and it impacts us all in different ways. Absolutely. But it has impacted us all. And so people want to find a place with purpose. People need to know that you have purpose, and people need to know that you are going to give them purpose through their career opportunity. Because I know people that are quitting their jobs just so that they can go find their purpose because they weren't getting the purpose they needed and they wanted to recalibrate. And that is something very respectful. Like that is incredible. And I honor and respect anyone that's doing that. But as an organization and as a leader, you have to be mindful of that. And if it hasn't impacted you yet, if you're sitting there thinking to yourself, oh, this doesn't impact me yet, it is going to impact you sooner than later. As I mentioned, the workforce that's coming in and millennials as well. This is stuff that they care about, and they only want to work for and do business with organizations that are demonstrating this. And they do have the lion's share of capital, and it will only get larger as time goes on. So being mindful, being thoughtful, making sure you're investing in your leaders. It's middle management is the toughest job out there, because a lot of times people are promoted because they were functionally good at something, but we don't often give them the resources to be successful. So make sure that you're giving people the resources to be successful, and also be intentional around, as an organization, where you're looking to go and what you're looking to do, and that your managers can speak to that verbatim. It's extremely important.
Right. And you just touched on it a little bit, but as leaders, how can we model what it means to embrace diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, well, first, you've been such an incredible leader to really jump on this work as soon as I joined BMC. We've had a lot of conversations around inclusive language, and I always appreciate you being authentic and sharing your journey as a leader. I think inclusive language is probably like the number one place that you can start as someone that is trying to build these teams. Inclusive language and giving people the opportunity to speak. So inclusive language, specifically in tech, getting rid of the terminology, like in your emails, in your product, like master slave, allow list, like whitelist, blacklist, allow list, deny list, grandfathered. Like these are all terms that have like historical and oftentimes traumatizing origins. So, if you are hearing these every day, this is microaggressions, and they're like 10,000 paper cuts. And as we talked about earlier, like you've got to take this mental energy to get over it. And like, you might not be getting the best from all of your employees because they're dealing with that. So just be mindful of those type of things. One of the things I love is I've started to see a lot of different like home and TV shows, like on HGTV, changing how they refer to different rooms. For instance, like master bedroom, like the master bedroom is called that because it was the master's bedroom. So instead of saying that, they're now saying primary bedroom. And like the fact that I'm seeing that now on TV is so impactful, because it makes such a difference when you start to think about like the historical origins of these words. Like just think about it, be intentional about what you're saying. And you're not going to see the right thing every time. And when you don't, a lot of the really great examples I've heard is I'll get an email from a BMCer and they'll say, like, my boss started off saying, hey guys, and then was like, stop. That was not inclusive. I'm going to start the meeting over. And as leaders, when we demonstrate authenticity and vulnerability, we're giving everyone else in the room the same permission to do so. And that drives innovation, because that's driving inclusiveness. So that is like the best place to start. Be curious. Come with a beginner's mind. Know that, yeah, maybe you might be considered an expert, but I used to do social media. I wouldn't do that anymore because what I thought I was an expert in 2012 does not even apply today. So just come from a place of learning and being curious and be accountable to yourself and to others. And we have some really great checklists too that are going to be in the Exchange Resource Center. We have a checklist around inclusive meetings. We have a checklist on our inclusive language that we talked about. And then we also have a checklist for self-aware leaders. Even if you're not technically a leader, if you are in meetings and groups with people, you are a leader. We are all leaders as humans. Someone follows us no matter what. So even if it's our pets. So take this and like do this self-aware checklist, and you'll find something on here that you know in the back of your mind you probably need to work on, and set an intention to do that. And then just be accountable and check in with yourself. And when you start to do that work on yourself, your team's going to see it, your colleagues are going to see it, your partners are going to see it, your family, your friends. So it's a really great checklist. And I know that it's centered around emotional intelligence, and it's something that I've really enjoyed in my journey.
Yeah, one of the things that was interesting, so I went through this with my team, and that second bullet, I understand the triggers and stressors in my life and have a plan for processing those. We spent a little bit of time talking about triggers and in the context of meetings, right? Of how do you know you're triggered? How do you know how to then control and contain and respond the way you would want someone to respond to you? Right? Particularly if someone steps on a trigger and maybe says something to you that's you view as a microaggression or rude, but they have no idea. Right? Because you don't want to come at that person with flames shooting out of your mouth and lightning out of your eyeballs, right? Like it's got to be, you have to assume positive intent, right? You have to assume that they weren't there to hurt your feelings, right? They may have, right? But then you share that in a very productive, thoughtful, not shaming kind of way. And I think that was one of the things we talked about of if we're triggered, if we feel like we're triggering someone else, and if that happens, what's a kind way to deal with that so that the learning process feels positive for everybody, right? That person doesn't feel called out or embarrassed or like, gosh, now I can't say anything, right? Or this other person doesn't feel like you're not taking it seriously, that you hurt my feelings. So I think that one it's just one bullet, but we got a lot of mileage out of that one.
Yeah.
And I think learned a lot about one another too, and like how to talk to one another better and get better results.
Yeah. And I love that example. And we hear so many stories like that across BMC of just doing this worksheet, not making it like a big show with a PowerPoint and, all these prep meetings around it, but just saying, hey, everyone, before you come to this meeting, do this, and we're all going to share something that we want to work, like we're going to share something that really stood out to us. And the organic dialogue that comes from that will take up your entire meeting. And to your point, you know each other better. You realize the intention of where people are coming from. You start to understand and just like build that psychological safety because we were being inclusive. And when we are more psychologically safe, aren't we sharing more ideas more with one another? Aren't we feeling safe to come out of left field with something that maybe we would have been scared to share before because we might have been mocked or something like that? So it's a great tool. And it's like, as I mentioned earlier, this stuff is very small and nuanced, but it makes such a difference. And I just always want to emphasize that because a lot of times people hear like that we're going through this diversity, equity, and inclusion programming, and they think it's just this, it's going to be like this huge thing. And I'm like, it is extremely important, but it's being intentional. It's having conversations. We as humans really like to control like what we eat, how we exercise, like what we're going to buy online. But oftentimes we don't focus on like controlling our emotions, like looking into ourselves and like really understanding why we are the way we are, what made us say that, and like going down those origins, like the path of why we said something. And I think that's something that is extremely important as we all, and as we see through the Great Resignation and this global catharsis, a lot of people are starting to really, get out of the matrix, I guess you would say, of why am I like, why am I here? Am I having good intentions? What is the purpose in my life? And how can I, create wonderful ideas and be a part of the innovation and transformational world that we're living in today? So a lot of exciting things here at BMC, a lot of exciting things happening in the world, and all from a great place.
Well, I think that is a great point to end on. So thank you so much for your time and for teaching us and for guiding us through all of this. I hope all of you who joined us today picked up something. Definitely feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn or social media. I know I post quite a bit about diversity and inclusion, and Wendy definitely does, but follow her first. But thank you all, and I hope you enjoy the rest of Exchange.
Enjoy Exchange and be kind to yourselves and be kind to others. Bye.